Welcome back to Pushing the Pile burlesque show on the desk here with this hour. We got Pete Prisco ranking every single football starter in the Super Bowl. You can find it on CBSSports.com, his article. But we got the man here himself to lay it all out.
By the way, real quick, see how his head's sweting from the andouille sauce?
I had some cake. My lips are still burning.
It was tremendous. Hey, mine does too. What am I talking about?
All right, we're going to start with the top 10 here. I'll read them off. We're going to talk, as we always do in the Goldilocks segment, who's too high, who's too low, who's just right. The top 10, Patrick Mahomes at 1, Saquon Barkley 2, Chris Jones 3, Jalen Carter 4, Lane Johnson 5, Creed Humphrey 6, Zach Bond 7, Trent McDuffie 8, Jordan Mailata 9, and then A.J. Brown rounds out the top 10. Who's too high, who's too low, who's just right, Kyle?
There's Lane Johnson at number 5. That's criminal. You know.
You saw him yesterday. Did he look like he'd be okay with being number 5?
I would put Chris Jones and Lane Johnson tied for 3rd. And then everybody else you want to put on the list, you can put them below that. I think Lane is at that level at the right tackle position, has been for a decade now. He's unbelievable.
You're nitpicking. He's at 5.
You know what, Pete? He asked me a question, Pete. And I think Lane's that good. Look.
I think Lane's great. But
your list is great. Patrick and Saquon, obviously up there. Chris Jones, Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter has to have a big game, has to have a huge game in order for me to put him above Lane Johnson on a GOAT list here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could see Lane Johnson going ahead of Jalen Carter, but I put Chris Jones.
You got no Joe Tooney on the list?
He's down a little way.
Disgusting.
That one does hurt for an offensive lineman.
Where's he playing?
You had, though.
Anywhere.
Saquon Barkley at 2. Have you ever put a running back that high when you've done this?
No, absolutely not.
Highest you've ever put?
Yeah, absolutely not. He's special.
That much of a game changer.
I mean, look, their offense is all about him. It really is. And that's not to take away from Hurts, by the way, because I do think that Hurts' ability to pull the ball is also a big factor in their run game, and it helps open things up for Barkley, and that offensive line does too. But he's been special.
The only thing I'll say in this is that I love where you have Zach Bond. I don't have too many quibbles with where you have the rank for the top 10. But I love that you put Zach Bond, put some respect on his name, because I think a lot of people think what he's done this year is fake in some way, shape, or form, because he's never done it. Obviously, he wasn't a starter for 4 years with New Orleans before signing for agency.
He wasn't an off-ball backer.
He was a miscast.
Completely miscast, and he goes here, and I've been saying this all season since season ended. If his name was anything other than Zach Bond, if his name was Fred Warner, if his name was Patrick Willis, if his name was, one of those guys, he would be your defensive player of the year.
Yep.
That's how good this guy was. And so even down at 7 may even be too low. I might even have him above a guy like Creed Humphrey because he has been that important to this Eagles defense all year long.
We'll see how about his value, by the way. He's an unrestricted free agent. So we'll see. He gambled on himself. He signed a 1-year deal. And so now we'll see, because we're going to find out if the rest of the league thinks how we think that he is that special.
Well, you're not ranking this by, pure value perspective,
no.
Right? Because obviously he ain't going to command what A.J. Brown commanded. He ain't going to command what, Jordan Mailata commanded. But I think a lot of people are going to see what he did this year. And I bet there turns out to be a pretty big market for him.
I would agree.
I love a guy who bets on himself like that. There's nothing better in sport than doing that, because there's a number of guys, myself included, who try to sign early, take a team-friendly deal to get some insurance to be covered for the next few years. A guy like Zach Bond goes out there, plays off-ball linebacker for the first time in the NFL, has a lot asked of him in the defense, the middle of that defense, and has been spectacular. And to your point, I think he maybe was the DPOY. And without a name, a guy like that shows up. It takes people a year to introduce themselves to the masses, to the layman's. But this guy Zach Bond has been on arrival. He was great for Philadelphia,
and he fits with what they want to do.
Yes.
Could this be, Pete? You have Chris Jones at 3, Jalen Carter at 4. Could this be a passing of the torch of sorts?
Yes.
With Jalen Carter in year 2, obviously Chris Jones, I believe, now year 9 for him. Passing the torch.
And I said, we said that on the show last week. I said this could be the flip of it. Because Chris Jones has been that good. Now, the one thing we know about Chris Jones, he always shows up in the big games.
Oh yeah.
This is the moment for Jalen Carter. If you're going to be that guy, you better show up in the big game. And he's done it so far, but he's got to do it in this one.
See, Jalen Carter is looking to try to change the game, and obviously so much of what the Chiefs do offensively can be foiled by Jalen Carter. If he's able to get Patrick on the ground, dent that pocket, the inside of the pocket where Patrick is trying to step up into it. He's thinking about 4 quarters and maybe overtime. Chris Jones will be meticulously planning his spots for the games, the biggest moments in the game. He has a unique sense of when we need to ramp it up to 11, and that's what Chris Jones does. He wins in the biggest moments.
You know what's funny is the one thing about that both of them, and it's kind of a little bit of a criticism of the both of them. They play better in the big games because they seem to play harder in the big games. Now,
that's why Chris Jones fell in the second round. I mean, people had effort concerns with his tape at Mississippi State,
and Carter had obvious a bunch of concerns. But Carter, early in his career, the first part of the last season, and on it, there were moments where he didn't play hard all the time. I didn't, and that was a criticism of him. Now,
that was a criticism of the entire unit there in the middle.
Yeah, but now that guy plays almost every snap.
Yes,
he's a beast, and so I think it went on for him. And yes, to answer your question, I do think it will be the flip of it.
All right, one other guy I want to talk about here, because people at home might be a little surprised that you have Jordan Mailata over A.J. Brown. Obviously, one of those guys, a much bigger name, gets much more storylines when they read a book on the bench than the other. If Jordan Mailata read a book on the bench, no one even bats an eye, right? But I don't agree. I don't disagree with it. I know Kyle doesn't disagree with it. What have you seen, Kyle, over the course of Jordan Mailata's career in his ascendance from a guy who didn't even play football, got drafted in the 7th round, to now an all-pro caliber left tackle?
I think that's been the most impressive thing. Not just his body of work in the NFL, but understanding where he came from and how he got to the league and the unit that he got into with Coach Stoutland and being opposite Lane Johnson. I think that's been such a fantastic part of watching his progression as a football player. The more years you play in the league, the slower things happen in your brain in terms of you see things faster, stuff doesn't get on you quickly. He has done a great job through that evolution as an offensive tackle. It allows Coach Stoutland and that offense to do so many different things. Get Jordan on the outside. You can block down, all those things. And I think being in the right room is important, and I alluded to it. But being with a guy like Landon Dickerson this year, being in that room with Lane Johnson, it's paid dividends.
And, you know, early in his career, he was a mauler who wasn't great in pass protection, and now he's become equally adept at both of them. And that's a sign of a guy who's worked at it. I mean, I saw him yesterday, and I was standing behind him. And I ain't exactly the biggest guy in the world, but I'm standing next to that guy. And I mean, and you're a big guy,
he's huge.
But he's just like a square.
Yeah,
it's imposing.
Yes.
The other thing, last thing here I want to know before we get to 11 through 34, it's just how insane this top 10 is. Like, if you do not have what these two teams are bringing to the table in terms of blue chip players, you just can't get on this football field. You ain't going to be a Super Bowl team. So I think, like, if you are a fan of the 30 other teams around the NFL and you don't have the sort of guys that can match up with this, you got 4 guys who are all in the mix there for the Chiefs for the best player in the NFL at their respective position. That's difficult to do. If you call Trent McDuffie a slot corner, I think all 4 are. And then you have 6 guys on the Eagles. Of those, I think 5 are all in the mix for conversation of the top player at their respective position. That is just top-end talent.
And the amazing thing about it is, and it goes back to something that I'm a big believer in it, but there's 3 offensive linemen in the top 10.
Yeah.
And that usually doesn't happen. And so I think that's a tribute to that side of the ball. And you mentioned Joe Tooney, and he's a guy that could have been, you know.
Trey Smith could have been in there.
Yeah.
And I hope we have a graphic for this so you don't have to trust me reading all names 11 through 34, but I'm just going to dive right into it. 11, Travis Kelce. 12, Joe Tooney. 13, Quinyon Mitchell. 14, Jalen Hurts. 15, Trey Smith. 16, Landon Dickerson. 17, Devontae Smith. 18, Justin Reed. 19, Nolan Smith. 20, George Karlaftis. 21, Xavier Worthy. 22, Dallas Goedert. 23, Leo Chanel. 24, Josh Sweat. 25, Nick Bolton. 26, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. 27, Cooper DeJean. 28, Milton Williams. 29, Darius Slay. 30, Drew Tranquil. 31, Mekhi Becton. 32, Jalen Watson. 33, Isaiah Pacheco. And 34, Jordan Davis. Did you catch all that? And if you didn't, we're going to rehash it. So who's too high, Kyle? Who's too low? And who's just right?
Well, the name that I see on here, George Karlaftis, he's at the 20 spot. But we talked about Chris Jones being a guy that steps up in big situations. He, to me, is a guy that has been big in big situations. Look, I don't have much issue with the list. I'm just going through here, taking a look at these guys right now. A lot of great players. We're so lucky to have the 11 through 33 be so star-studded. When you see a list that says middle of the pack that starts with Travis Kelce and Joe Tooney, you go, man, we're in for some.
Both of them out of the 10, but in the top 10. But I think because look, Kelce we know shows up in the big moments, but he didn't show up in the game against the Bills.
I was going to say, Pete, you've watched Kelce this year. You cannot realistically believe that he is the 11th best player in this game. He's obviously an impactful player for the Kansas City Chiefs. If you are taking players in a random draft to play this game, you are not drafting him 11th. You're not taking him over Joe Thuney.
Well, he also doesn't play a value position either, though.
But he is slow as all you know what at this point.
Not Thuney. I'm talking about Kelsey.
Watch yourself.
Kelsey.
I know.
Thuney plays a value position. He plays left tackle.
Hey, look, if it's the Super Bowl, if it's a championship game, if it's the playoffs, I want number 87 on my team. I got no issue with you having him at number 11.
I had people questioning he wasn't in the 10.
I got no issue with you having him at number 11.
Okay.
But then again, I understand where you're coming from. And the body of work this year speaks to the fact that Travis Kelce isn't quite the 87 that we've come to know and love so much over the last decade. But look, we all know one time. It's like when I asked my old man, I say, could you still play? He said, I can give you one drive, 2 plays maybe. But Travis Kelce can give you one
against the Texans, he gave you a lot more than one drive.
For everything.
And he wasn't good last week. So look, I think he'll be good on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
He'll be good.
He's my too high. I'll give you my too low. And I think he's egregiously too low. 10-plus spots too low. I think Milton Williams, and you'll see it in free agency this year because I believe he's in free agency.
He is in free agency.
You'll see how too low he is. To me, he is as good a pass rusher as Jalen Carter. Now, he's not as complete a defender on the interior as Jalen Carter, but this guy is twitched up. And if he gets one-on-ones with Mike Caliendo, he's a guy that could take over this football game.
Milton Williams is a good player, and he's good. And I'm actually starting to work on my free agency rankings, and he's going to be pretty high up on that list. But the run defense isn't great. I mean, that's it. You can't knock him for that.
Disagree.
And so when you look at the list, okay, you say 10 spots too low? Who are you putting him ahead of?
I would rather have him than Nolan Smith right now in this game.
Oh, no.
For the Philadelphia Eagles.
Oh, no.
I'd rather have him than Justin Reed.
I agree with you on the Nolan Smith.
I think Justin Reed's, by the way, Justin Reed's an unrestricted free agent as well. I think Justin Reed might be the most underrated player in the entire game.
That's fair. I think he's very
Tackles, good near the line of scrimmage, can cover on the back end.
He had that pop on Devontae Smith last time.
I think Justin Reed's the most underrated player in the entire game. I think he's going to be enormous in this game on Sunday.
Really smart player, really tough player, guy who likes to get his nose in it, but also is really heady on the back end. Love Justin Reed. Love this whole group.
I mean, you could sit here and say that Worthy's too high, but I think where he is right now and what he's meant to them in the last 6 weeks of the season.
Where would Rashee Rice be on this list if he was healthy?
If he's healthy,
top 10?
No, probably like 13 or 14, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Xavier Worthy, I am not arguing. I think he's the guy who I thought was just right at 21. He is. We'll get to Hollywood Brown later because he hasn't been mentioned yet. I think he's a little too low also. But Xavier Worthy, the late season ascendance of him, ascendance. There we go. Of him has been well deserved, and they finally, I think, figured out how to use him. He's a guy that can run more routes than your typical speed wide receiver. That's why I loved him so much in the draft, and that's why when the Chiefs got him, I was like, I think the rest of the NFL screwed up. But they didn't quite realize how just to deploy him, you have to give him free releases. If you get him a clean release off the line of scrimmage, dynamite. Guys have to get their hands on him early. If you can shut him down. And so I'm curious to see what the Philadelphia Eagles do because they like to play off. They like to play deep zone. They like to do that sort of stuff. It's been Vic Fangio's MO. But if you give him free releases, he is a guy that basically the entire route tree is at his disposal at that point.
Yeah, and he's proven to people that he's much more than just a go ball guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most important thing about him. He's little, so when you do get your hands on him, it's tough for him to get off the line.
Underneath stuff can turn into go balls. If you catch the ball at the right speed, if you're doing a mesh concept, if you're going underneath a check down in the old nomenclature, a guy like Xavier Worthy can turn that into a go ball in terms of yards after the catch. He can run out and up and around people. The issue early on in the season with Xavier Worthy was he was too damn fast, and his route concepts ended up out of bounds. He was catching the ball out of bounds.
And he wasn't catching the ball.
So they started throwing him the ball in the middle of the field. And what does he do? Then he picks where to run with it. Xavier Worthy's so dangerous.
By the way, I wrote my prediction out yesterday on CBSSports.com, and the prediction is that the Chiefs win and Worthy scores the game-winning touchdown in the final 2 minutes on a Mahomes drive down the field.
Well,
maybe they go corn dog.
What was the corn dog again?
Corn dog, little corn dog motion.
Oh, yeah, they did it twice last time.
Yeah.
Right?
Mecole Hardman?
No, I think it was Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, Kadarius.
And it was, what's his face? Sky Moore. Neither, I believe, will be playing in this one. The interesting one here that I think everyone's going to raise an eyebrow at, Jalen Hurts. 14th.
Oh!
Explain yourself, Pete.
Well, pitchforks are coming to you.
Well, he hasn't been as good this year. I don't think there's any question about that. If it was Jalen Hurts that we saw in that Super Bowl a couple years ago, he'd have been in the top 10.
Okay.
But he hadn't played to that this year, and there were questions about him holding. He holds the ball too long. When they are throwing the ball, he holds it too long. He could turn good plays into bad plays. He could turn bad plays into good plays. That's who he is. So I think 14's about right for him.
He has an opportunity to kind of rewrite the book on himself with a win against Patrick Mahomes.
If Barkley goes for 170 and 2 touchdowns, and they win, and he throws
Barkley goes for 95. Jalen Hurts has no turnovers and 2 touchdowns.
Then he rewrites the book.
6 or 7 conversions on the tush push.
Yeah,
the tush push is an accident.
That's the one thing that Hurts gets underrated with him. Everyone wants to talk about his passing yards, but O-line's great. Saquon's great. The option run and the tush pushes are a massive part of that offense. I mean, we saw it a couple weeks ago when he went for a long one against, I believe it was the Commanders.
Yeah, he pulled it on he scored the very first touchdown of the game. I'm giving you that. The tush push, come on, give me a break. It's an accident play.
Somebody who says that the tush push isn't a skillful play has never played football. And what's the guy's name who I'm talking about from the Packers? The president of the Packers?
Mike Murphy.
Mark Murphy.
Mark Murphy. Come on, man.
And he played football.
Come on. You never ran the tush push.
He did play football.
Did he play guard?
No, he played, I think, where he played.
He was a slot
he was
or a
outside.
receiver
He played
or
outside.
a DB
or
a safety, somewhere away from the line of scrimmage.
He's being forced to retire this year because he's too old.
Now, let me ask you this. You think
that
you
pisses me off.
You give him credit? You give him credit for the tush push?
I give the guards, the center, and the quarterback credit to physically, mentally convince yourself and have conviction to go down there and put your face and your neck in it, drive those feet, hit the weight room all off season.
Well, the other part of that question is, should the quarterback be doing it?
It doesn't matter. It's getting done. It's happening.
The quarterback
if you have a problem with it, load your oxen up with weights in the offseason and get them ready to stop Jalen Hurts in that offense in the tush push.
I know what I'm doing if I'm on that side and they start doing the tush push to me. I'm starting to take some shots underneath that damn pile.
Some cheap shots?
Yeah, damn right.
What are we hitting? What's our strike zone?
Something I grabbed way back in the day when I was underneath the pile and had a high-pitched voice come up.
This guy, dude. Unbelievable.
The other interesting thing that jumped off the page to me, Quinyon Mitchell, 13. Cooper DeJean, 27. The Eagles' first and second round picks in the secondary. Traditionally a position that it ain't the easiest to transfer to the NFL. A lot of corners come into the league and get burnt toast year one. Those guys aren't only burnt toast, they are legitimate value adds, the cornerstones of that Philadelphia Eagles secondary, both higher than Darius Slay on this rankings, the guy who was, the previous cornerstone for last Super Bowl.
And Slay did not play very well in the beginning of this season. I give him credit because he's come on over the course of the final part of the season on into the postseason. But these two guys have been really great at coverage.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Slay's a vet, and you're never going to feel 100% as a veteran. But if you're a veteran and you go about your business the right way, you can maintain that level of physicality throughout the season. And I'm sure for these younger guys that are in the building, the edge kind of wore off a little bit on them, and now they're all kind of even, and Slay's able to pick up the pace there on his end. But I think that a big part of that secondary success is a guy like Darius Slay and the leadership he has on those young guys.
It is funny to me as draft analyst. Last 2 drafts, Eagles, you couldn't find a grading of their drafts that wasn't like an A+. And then lo and behold, it turns into Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. 4 guys who are cornerstones to this defense, have completely transformed what they've done since last Super Bowl because there's been so much turnover. And their best defense in the NFL now.
They have one starter on the defensive line who started in that Super Bowl, and it's Sweat, who's also an unrestricted free agent, by the way.
We've ranked starters 1 through 34 in the Super Bowl. We're going to get to 35 through 46. As always, you can find it on CBSSports.com. Pete's rankings of every single Super Bowl starter. All right, let's get into it. 35. Cam Jurgens, the center. We're going to talk about that one off the top. 36, Mike Dana. 37, Shamari Connor. 38, Reed Blankenship. 39, Marquise Brown. 40, Juwan Taylor. 41, Mike Pennell. 42, Oren Burks. 43, Brian Cook. 44, Juju Smith-Schuster. 45, Jahan Dotson. 46, Mike Caliendo.
Somebody had to be last, Mike.
Yeah, it's got to be tough to be behind the guys like Oren Burks, who literally were backups until just a few weeks ago. But, hey.
Well, Caliendo was a backup, too.
Yeah, there's some really good players on this list here still. I mean, we're going down this list. I'll start with number 36, Michael Dana, a guy who was a role rusher in Kansas City. He's come up big in some big moments, pressures, hits on the quarterback. I look for that to be a guy who can make some sneaky big plays in this Super Bowl. He's no stranger to big games. He's been a part of these defensive fronts with Chris Jones and all the cast of characters for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a guy to have your eyes on anytime it's third down.
And they brought him back on a 3-year contract this year, in large part because Andy Reid loves the way he works.
Yep.
And he's one of those guys.
He is a great dude.
He's a good guy to have on your team. He's never going to be a star, but he's a good guy to have on your team.
And he's always, you know what? There are players with talent that end up out of their assignment, and I'll put that guy on the bench 100 days in a row just to have a guy out there who I know is going to do their assignment. I know is going to use those techniques. And Brendan Daly, the defensive line coach for the Kansas City Chiefs, he loves a guy like Michael Dana. To your point, he's exemplary. You need those kind of guys in the lineup.
Cam Jurgens at 35, though. I believe he was a Pro Bowler this year at center. One of the keystones, obviously taking over for Jason Kelce.
Don't ever mention Pro Bowler. Fans vote for that.
Valid.
Stop.
But that's why fans may be questioning why he's down at 35 for you. That's what I want to say.
I mean, look, I think he's been okay. He's been good, solid, but nothing special at center. I think it's been an adjustment for him. Next year, I think it'll be much better. It's much like Mailata, Dickerson. They get better, I think, as they get adjusted position. I think this is one for him where Becton, if you graded the offensive lineman on that team this year, he was the worst of the group.
I agree. Yeah, I'm not debating.
So that's why I had him down there.
Well, they also have their center do a number of things externally. He pulls really well. Yes. He gets to the second level. He's incredibly balanced and fluid with his technique. He's consistently getting onto guys at the second level. I think that's a big reason why Jason Kelce, we've all heard he handpicked Cam Jurgens to replace him. And you can see why, because there's a number of things that are in the same motif, same genre as Kelce did. Getting outside in space and getting on guys, getting the play started for Saquon.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player.
And the tush push. Your favorite play in football. It takes a special kind of human to get down there and be the center at the tip of the spear for that tush push. And they got another one.
You got a tough guy.
The other guy I want to hit on, the guy who's dead last on this list, Mike Caliendo, and I floated this to you. Do we think, because of the way the Eagles' best pass rushers, they are both on the interior. It's Milton Williams, it's Jalen Carter. Those guys can get after it.
Yeah, but you're discounting Nolan Smith the way he's been playing.
But I'm saying your best pass rushers. Nolan Smith, I mean, like, they're all.
Let's just call it this. The real threat for the Philadelphia Eagles against the Kansas City Chiefs looms inside on the interior part of the defensive front. I think you guys are discounting
Nolan Smith on the outside.
So what he asked me was,
I know what he asked me because I think people have
back to guard, and I said absolutely not.
But it's. So he'll be going against Sweat, though. So Nolan Smith's going to be against Juwan Taylor. Right? That's where he stays, left.
Right.
Sweat's on the right side going up against.
And Sweat led them in sacks this year.
Okay. Well, that's an edge guy's going to lead you in sacks.
But again, you're just discounting the edge guys. Look, I get it. I thought about that for a second. I said, do you put Humphreys in the lineup and put Tooney back at left guard? You know why you don't?
Let's hear it.
You can find guards anywhere. They grow on trees.
But not against Nolan.
Okay, so I hate to bring up tennis on a football show, but people that play with each other in doubles, they get used to spacing. I understand which balls are going to be yours, which ones are mine, where my feet are going to be in comparison to yours. And when I think about double teams and I think about having a guy in your hip pocket, you have to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that his technique is going to match yours. Continuity matters at the offensive line position. And when you're talking about guards and centers, it matters even more there. And for Joe Tooney, I have no problem saying, hey, big guy, you're out there on the island. We got to deal with these dragons on the inside. Do not change anything. Keep it as it has been since they went and played Myles Garrett in Cleveland.
Yeah, because my other part of that is he's going up against Josh Sweat, who's a very long edge rusher. And Tooney, the reason he's in at guard is because he doesn't have long arms. And that is where you worry, is where a guy with 34 plus inch arms.
But he also, when he was against Daniil Hunter, who's got long arms too, he did it okay. He did a solid job against him too. So when he played him in the playoffs. So I think I'd keep him at left tackle. But as far as Caliendo, look, he's a grinder. He's like when Allegretti went in last year and played. He's not as good as Allegretti, but he also has as much experience as Allegretti. I think you let the grinder grind and let Tooney play left tackle.
You keep Tooney at the left tackle position because who has become the most comfortable with Joe Tooney at left tackle? Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
And when Patrick Mahomes knows beyond the shadow of a doubt that he can make his drop at 10 yards, step up to 5 yards, deliver a strike, see what's in front of him develop in terms of the protection, that is a huge thing. What I saw early on in the season with Kingsley Suamataia, with Wanye Morris, I saw a short edge on the blind side. And that leads to a guy like Patrick Mahomes, or any quarterback for that matter, having doubts, stepping up too soon, not getting to the top of your drop. Their offense changed drastically with Joe Thuney. It's the best way to go.
Plus, you can find guards anywhere.
Last guy I want to talk about, then we'll get to break. Hollywood Brown, 39th on this list. But to me, I'm not saying he should be higher, but I think he's been a key to the Chiefs offense, because it's like going from a guy who would have been, 46th on this list to a guy who's 39th. Like, his emergence at the end of the season after coming back from that shoulder injury, I think it just adds a different dynamic to this offense, because you can play soft on Xavier Worthy all you want, but now this gives you two speed guys. It gives you two guys that stretch the field, and I think Kelsey has been the guy who's been like the beneficiary of it, because now there's space for him to work over the middle of the football field.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I think when you look at it, the fact that he can run scares people.
Yeah.
The fact that Worthy can run scares people, and you defend it. You defend it differently. I mean, you see, we talk about the Rams all the time. The Rams scare nobody because they don't run. The Chiefs were a lot like that until these guys started going. Who was scaring anybody? Nobody. After Tyreek Hill, who scared anybody down the field? And I think that's the biggest difference for them. You can't defend them like that anymore because they can go.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because at 44, there's Juju Smith-Schuster. And that's a guy, when the chips are down in the roster for Kansas City, they can throw him in there and he can run these zone concepts and find a way to get open, find the soft spots in the defense. He's a guy that Patrick Mahomes trusts on third down. I think the more of those guys you can have on the field, the better.
It's funny. They talked about Hopkins, the big acquisition. He doesn't even start, and he didn't even have a catch.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
All right, there's your 46 starters ranked 1 to 46. Go to CBSSports.com. Check out Pete's full list and his explanations for all of them.